White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby was questioned Tuesday by Ed O'Keefe of CBS News.
How does this not violate the red line that the president laid out?
As I said, we don't want to see a major ground operation. We haven't seen that at this point.
How many more charred corpses does he have to see before the president considers a change in policy?
We don't want to see a single more innocent life taken. And I kind of take a little offense at the question. No civilian casualties is the right number of civilian casualties. And this is not something that we've turned a blind eye to, nor has it been something we've ignored or neglected to raise with our Israeli counterparts, including, Ed, this weekend, as a result of this particular strike. Now, they're investigating it, so let's let them investigate it and see what they come up with.
At the United Nations, Algeria has proposed a new resolution to demand Israel halt its offensive in Rafah. Meanwhile, Mexico has become the latest country to join South Africa's genocide case against Israel. Despite the growing international condemnation, Israel's continuing to attack us. On Tuesday, Palestinian medical officials said at least 21 people were killed in an Israeli air attack on a tent camp in Al-Mawasi, in an area Israel has designated as a humanitarian safe zone. The dead included at least 12 women. Over 60 Palestinians were injured. On the humanitarian front, aid shipments to Gaza by sea have been halted after a new U.S.-made pier broke apart in rough seas. The temporary $320 million pier had only become operational less than 2 weeks ago. It's expected to take at least a week to fix. In other news from the region, former Republican presidential candidate Ambassador Nikki Haley visited Israel Tuesday and was photographed signing an Israeli artillery shell. She wrote the words, "Finish them!" exclamation point.
Nikki Haley, you see that?
A joint investigation by The Guardian and the Israeli news outlet 972 has revealed Israel's run an almost decade-long secret war against the International Criminal Court in an attempt to derail the court from filing war crimes charges against Israeli officials.
Imagine
the report details how Israel surveilled, hacked, smeared, and threatened top ICC officials, including the current chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, and his predecessor, Fatou Bensouda. The news outlets report the former head of the Israeli Mossad, Yossi Cohen, personally threatened Bensouda, telling her, quote, "You should help us and let us take care of you. You don't want to be getting into things that could compromise your security or that of your family," unquote. Despite the threats by Israel, the ICC's Karim Khan announced earlier this month he's seeking arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, as well as 3 Hamas leaders. Another senior official at the State Department has resigned to protest President Biden's policies on Gaza. The official, Stacey Gilbert, served in the State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. The Washington Post reports Gilbert sent an email to staff Tuesday criticizing a recent State Department report that concluded Israel's not obstructing U.S. humanitarian assistance to Gaza.
That's a lie.
Protests over Israel's war on Gaza continue across the globe. In London, police arrested 40 pro-Palestinian protesters Tuesday night after about 10,000 people rallied to call on Israel to halt its attacks on Rafah. In Mexico City, police fired tear gas at protesters outside the Israeli embassy Tuesday. Meanwhile, in Paris, France's lower house of parliament has suspended a lawmaker for 15 days for holding up a Palestinian flag during a debate on Israel. And in Canada, dozens of faculty at the University of Toronto spoke out Tuesday, a day after school officials sought a court injunction to clear a student pro-Palestinian encampment. Jury deliberations are beginning today in Donald Trump's hush money and election interference trial. During closing arguments Tuesday, prosecutors accused the former president of trying to subvert democracy and, quote, hoodwink the American voter. Meanwhile, Trump's legal team attempted to discredit Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, who testified against his former boss. Trump attorney Todd Blanche called Cohen, quote, the greatest liar of all time, the gloat. Prosecutors reminded jurors that the case rests on the documentary evidence and not just on Cohen's testimony. Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, also told jurors Trump could go to jail if convicted. This led to Judge Juan Merchan admonishing him for making what the judge called a, quote, outrageous and highly inappropriate remark. Outside the courthouse, the Biden campaign held a press conference featuring 2 police officers who worked during the January 6th insurrection, as well as actor Robert De Niro, who warned against another Trump presidency.
That's a lie.
It's the time to stop him by voting him out once and for all.
That's a lie.
We don't want to wake up after the election saying, what, again?
That's a lie.
What the hell have we done?
He's lying. He's working for the Zionists. Robert De Niro is working for the Zionists.
Trump legal
That's a
news.
lie.
U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon, who's hearing Trump's classified files case, has denied a request by prosecutors to place a gag order on Trump to prevent him from attacking law enforcement agents involved in the case. She was appointed by President Trump. In climate news, India has issued a red alert a day after temperatures in New Delhi reached a record 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, in Brazil, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights is holding hearings to determine what legal obligations countries should face for the climate emergency. The hearings come after historic floods in Brazil displaced hundreds of thousands of people and killed over 150. This is Luisa Tuxa of the Tuxa people in northeastern Brazil.
Over India.
This is the moment we want the Inter-American Court to hear us. Hear our cry, hear our call, hear our anguish. Feel some of the pain that the indigenous peoples of Brazil have been going through for thousands of years.
In Papua New Guinea, rescue efforts are continuing after a landslide killed as many as 2,000 people. Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister James Marape said the changing climate is devastating his country.
No, they are controlling the climate.
We had extraordinary rainfall that has caused flooding in river areas, sea level rise in coastal areas, and landslips in few areas. For instance, we almost had the entire South Simbu, the access
come off the ice caps.
Passage through the Gumini Highway that was completely cut for almost a month.
Haiti's unelected transitional council has named Gary Conille to be Haiti's new prime minister just a month after some members of the council picked a different official for the job. Conille briefly served as Haiti's prime minister over a decade ago, had been working as a development specialist at UNICEF. The transitional council was formed after Ariel Henry agreed to resign as prime minister amidst an uprising by armed groups. In the nation of Georgia, lawmakers have voted to override a presidential veto of a controversial bill that could force many NGOs and media outlets to register as foreign agents. On Tuesday, one opposition lawmaker in Georgia was doused with water while he spoke out against the legislation. The EU has warned passage of the bill could jeopardize Georgia's chances of joining the bloc. Voters in South Africa are casting ballots today in nationwide elections. Polls suggest the ruling African National Congress could lose its majority for the first time since Nelson Mandela was elected in 1994. In election news here in the United States, Texas House Speaker Republican Dade Phelan narrowly won a primary runoff against David Covey, a far-right candidate who was endorsed by Donald Trump and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Meanwhile, Texas Republican Congressmember Tony Gonzalez has declared victory in a primary runoff against gun rights advocate Brandon Herrera, who is nicknamed the AK Guy. Gonzalez, who represents Uvalde, Texas, broke with his Republican colleagues last year to support new gun control legislation after the massacre at Robb Elementary School.
Sucking balls.
And the Libertarian Party has picked Chase Oliver to be its presidential nominee after party members turned down appeals from both Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Donald Trump, who was met by a round of boos and jeers when he addressed the Libertarian Convention on Saturday. Meanwhile, Jill Stein has announced she's won enough delegates to be the Green Party's presidential nominee. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy
candidates. Why
Goodman
we
in
always
New
get the
York,
same
joined by
ones?
Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Everybody talking all this good shit.
Hi, Amy, and welcome
putting
to all of our
forward
listeners and viewers
a better
across the
candidate
country and around
at
the
all?
world.
Jury deliberations begin today in Donald Trump's hush money and election interference trial. Trump has been charged with 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in relation to a $130,000 hush money payment that his former lawyer Michael Cohen made to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. The prosecutions argued the payments were part of a wider scheme to illegally influence the 2016 presidential election and prevent Daniels from going public with her claim she had sex with Trump.
That's blackmail.
Trump has denied that any such encounter took place and has dismissed the entire trial as a politicized attack.
That's
In a
blackmail.
marathon day of closing arguments, Trump's defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, sought to discredit Cohen, calling him, quote, the greatest liar of all time.
No, he's
Gloat,
not. The
and
demon
human
Democrats and all the
embodiment
other
of reasonable
politicians, crooked
doubt.
motherfuckers
Meanwhile,
is.
prosecutor Joshua Steinglass
Not just
argued
him.
the payment scheme amounted
That's a
to an
lie.
effort by Trump to, quote, manipulate and defraud voters to pull the wool over their eyes in a coordinated
That's
fashion.
a lie.
He also portrayed Cohen as a flawed individual, but one who offered invaluable testimony, backed up by documents. If Trump is found guilty, it'll likely be weeks or months until he's eventually sentenced. The charges carry a maximum of 4 years in prison. In his closing arguments, Trump's lawyer told jurors Trump could go to jail if convicted. This led to the judge admonishing Blanche for making what the judge called a, quote, outrageous and highly inappropriate remark. For more, we're joined by Ron Kuby. He's a criminal defense and civil rights lawyer based here in New York who's closely following all the Trump cases. He's joining us in New York. It's great to have you with us, Ron.
Thank you, Amy.
Why don't you just summarize the closing arguments yesterday and what your assessment of them was?
Summarizing an amazing 8 hours total of argument. Not going to be an easy thing to do. Basically, the defense strategy they went on for 2 to 3 hours was to not tell a counter narrative, not explain another reason why all this stuff was done, but just to search for reasonable doubt. Like when we were little kids, we'd look at puzzles and, circle the rabbits that are hidden in the puzzle. And that's kind of what the defense was doing.
Nobody did
Michael
that
Cohen's
bullshit.
a reasonable doubt. Stormy Daniels is, and all of the discrepancies were reasonable doubts. Unfortunately, as the prosecution sort of indicated in their 5.5-hour marathon, a trial isn't a search for reasonable doubts. Oh, look, I found one. No, it's a search for the truth. And while he could have told the story in 4 hours rather than 6, frankly, it was an amazing summation in which every piece of evidence was explained as a part of the entire narrative of Trump criminality. And it was wildly persuasive in a way that summations usually are not. Now, what the jury does with it, with any of it, of course, is impossible
bullshit.
to know. Half the time, I don't
Because
even
if he had
know
to
what's
pay
going on in the
Stormy
minds
Daniels to
of
keep
my
her mouth
family,
shut,
let alone
then he was
12 people
fearing
that I've never
blackmail.
met before.
That's bullshit. The case should have never made it to court.
Ask you,
That's
what do you think
bullshit.
is the impact of either way and the fact that neither
And for
the
them to
defense nor
uphold
the
this in the court of
prosecution
law
called
is straight
Alan
trickery,
Weisselberg,
politician,
the chief
criminality,
financial guy for
and
Trump,
government
and the guy at the center
criminality
of this
in itself.
alleged conspiracy. What impact will that have? you
Because
think?
I don't think it's going to have much of an
after
effect at all.
a standing president.
Honestly, they
is
have the
still the
Weisselberg
president
memo
to me.
in there. Either side could have called him. Neither side did. So arguing that
It's a
the
bullshit
defense should have
case.
called Weisselberg if he
There
was
is no
going to
light to this
corroborate
case that worth anything the paper
Trump's
is writing on.
account of this is as
First of
silly
all,
as
using
arguing
campaign money
the opposite. Plus, the
before
jury
he
doesn't
was
know where
president
Weisselberg is. They don't know that he's sitting around
is
in
a fine.
Rikers
Number
Island right
two,
now in the
if he had to pay Stormy
geriatric wing
Daniels
on
for
his
fear that
second
she would
perjury
run her
plea.
mouth,
For all they know,
you know what I'm
he's
saying?
dead or
He
out of
felt that
town
he
or
could be
is lying there
blackmailed.
with a heart attack. So I don't think it's going to make much
either
difference.
way, the case should have never made it to
And
court.
of the 34 counts that Trump is facing, are there any that you think are more likely to get a guilty verdict than some of the others?
No, because they're all essentially the same conduct. Falsifying business records, which clearly were falsified. Donald Trump causing those business records to be falsified, which I think has been proved.
That's still
and
justifying.
Doing so for the purpose of committing another crime. And let's face it, most people, when they falsify business records, they do it to either get something that they're not allowed to get or to avoid doing something the law requires them to do. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know, should I cook up some bacon and eggs or should I cook up my business records?
Explain the other crime. I wonder if you polled people in this country, if they understood what he is being tried for, would they really know?
They wouldn't, and in fact, the defense didn't fully find out until a few days ago. There are three other crimes that, and the jury doesn't have to agree.
It's all into discrediting the
New
man
York State law
to keep him from running for presidency.
That is the machinations of Trump and Cohn and Daniels constituted interference or conspiracy under New York State election law. 2, federal election law, even though there's no jurisdiction to prosecute federal law, and the feds decided not to prosecute Trump for this. Cases in New York have held that if you're covering up your business records or falsifying business records to conceal a federal crime, you can be prosecuted. And usually it's a federal tax crime. And the third is
that doesn't carry jail time. That carries a fine.
Crime. That is,
each one of those 34 counts only carries a fine. Does not carry jail time. It does not.
They paid him
and it's a kangaroo set of
what he was owed because he had to pay taxes on the money that he got from Trump to reimburse him for the Stormy Daniels payout. And ordinarily, when I collect a legal fee, if I'm charging a client $10,000, I don't say, better make it 20 because I have to pay taxes on that. I pay taxes out of the money that I get, like everybody else. So 3 potential crimes.
And the proof that this involved the election and not just wanting to hurt his wife Melania and his family for having had an affair with Stormy Daniels is that the sex allegedly happened in 2006, and they're paying her off less than 2 weeks before the election, 10 years later in 2016.
Right after the Access Hollywood tape came out where he made his assaultive and crude comments, and people thought that he might be doomed from that. If he cared about Melania, the argument goes, and Steinglass made this yesterday, he would have paid her off in 2006, 2007.
That's a setup.
And Ron, what do you sense would be the political ramifications of either way
even
the case
if you
goes,
made
whether
comments and you
Trump is convicted or
and then use it against him? That's blackmail.
Well, now you're talking outside of my area of expertise, Juan. I will say, from the people I've spoken to, the people who support Trump are absolutely undeterred by the potential conviction.
It's
a rigged trial, it's a phony trial, it's Biden weaponization, blah, 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 all the same stuff that Trump has emphasized over and over again.
It's trash.
Whether it's going to be a conviction would be enough to peel away some voters, I have no idea.
No, it won't.
So finally, on a different note, you represent many protesters.
All y'all have done criminal shit.
Those who are protesting
whether you
around
like
Gaza,
it or not.
students from
the
City
rich
College
to
to
the
purchase,
Zionists, all the way through the government and many politicians.
The climate
what make him so
protesters from
special?
outside Citibank to the Westminster dog show last week.
Saying the bullshit. He's saying
and most of those cases have gone fairly well. The Purchase students have had their charges dismissed. The Fordham students are getting their charges dismissed. A lot of the City College students, though, are facing some felony charges, and I've got some of those cases. And Extinction Rebellion did a fantastic protest at the Westminster Dog Show with their usual, no dog shows on a dead planet banner that disrupted things. We're in court on that on Friday, and it is indeed going to be a rough case. But I will continue to work pro
bono.
There you go, Amy.
Such a dogged attorney.
Oh.